Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update. Join the only official Telegram channel of RAU'S IAS Study Circle to get relevant material and important updates.
Hello everyone and welcome to Daily News Simplified, your one-stop solution to detailed analysis of current affairs which are published in the Delhi edition of Hindu newspaper and are equally relevant for your UPSC preparation. Article dated 22nd of January 2022 are listed on your screen and the timestamping for these articles is already given in the description box. So let us begin with the first article for the day. This article was published on page 1st of Delhi edition Hindu newspaper and talks about the current status of startups in the country. The article is based on a privately conducted study which was conducted under NASSCOM and Zenov. This study says that startups have raised a record of $24 billion last year, despite having the COVID situation. This 24 billion is a twofold, that is 200% rise over what was the situation in pre-COVID levels. Apart from this, the article also says that United States remains the leading source of FDI in the startups, as also the case that US is the top startup hub in the world. So the nation itself promotes the startup and the firms which are based in the US also promotes the startups in the other countries including India. The jobs which were created because of these startups were mostly focused in banking, financial services and insurance, followed by educational technologies, retail, food technology, supply chain management, logistics and mobility. The biggest problem of this FDI is that the FDI coming to the startup sector is only limited to the technological or service related activities or sectors. It has neglected the primary sector including agriculture, animal husbandry or fishing. It has also rejected completely the provision towards the rural sector. So today we do not find large startups coming up in the rural areas. But this is not the only problem that we face as far as startup culture is concerned. Today, in this article, we will go through the entire analysis of startup sector, startup ecosystem in India, along with the basic challenges which this sector is facing, as well as the initiatives taken by the government, along with some other possible way forwards. So, along with the current affairs, we will also look into some of the static features that can help you to frame good study material for the startup sector, which may be asked by the UPSC in your General Studies Paper 3, in relation to the effects of liberalization, changes in the industrial policy, as startup is part of the industrial policy. And also, the challenges of startups are part of effects on industrial growth. The content for this article would include what are the startups, the status or the current situation of startups in India, that we will look into some of the important data. We'll also look into the challenges which are faced by startups in country, in India, what are the government initiatives that have been taken up, and lastly we'll look into some of the possible way forwards in order to promote this sector to the further extent. So let us start with understanding what is a startup. Well, if you go through the business definition, startup refers to a company, not an NGO, but a company, which is in the first stage of operation, that is functioning. It has just started functioning. It is a new company which is trying to develop through the skills of entrepreneurship. They want to bring a new product or a service in the market, and they believe that this product will be demanded in the economy. For this startup, they are looking for funding sources. They may look into venture capitalist, crowdfunding, or even the bank loans. Now let me put this entire definition into an example. I'll take the example of India's one of the top startup, Flipkart, or we can take the example of Paytm. Now these two companies were founded in India by Indians. They started the first stage of productions or operation. Flipkart decided to sell products online. Paytm started to act as an intermediaries to make online payments. They developed their own products. One was based on online or e-commerce, the other one was the e-wallets. They looked for new entrepreneurship skills, which they did had, and they were looking for funding resources. Now these two companies are very large and they have high grade of foreign direct investment that they are even now termed as unicorns. That is earning beyond $1 billion. On the other hand, in order to promote this startup culture in India, Government of India has created its own definition. They say that an entity here means a company, private company, maybe the other limited partnerships or the partnership firms, which have not completed a 10-year of its operation, incorporation or registration. So it should be a new company. Secondly, it should be either private, a partnership based, or a limited liability partnership. That is, it should not be a non-governmental organization, civil society, or a government company. Its turnover, see, the word is turnover. The turnover here simply means how much the company is earning every year. And this earning, irrespective of the depreciation, the taxations, and everything else, should not exceed 100 crores. Now, as you can see, Paytm and Flipkarts are no longer in this category. So they are now a well-established companies, large multinational companies. But when they started, they were these startups. Now they are a large companies because their turnover now is in billion dollars. Government also says that they should focus on innovation, development, improvement of products, or even the services. They should bring some kind of new innovation, new technologies, or new ideas into the market. And they should have high potential to create employment as well as wealth creations. I'll give you an example of Ola Cabs. Now, because of this company, because of this startup, now it is a large company. So when it was a startup, it started giving employment to many people. Over 10,000 people in India have got direct, indirect employment because of Ola Cabs. So because of this, government wants to provide a certain definition so that the startup culture in India can get a push from the government. So for instance, if a company wants to be a startup and does have a revenue of 500 crore rupees, so government is not going to support these large companies. They will support only those companies which have smaller revenue but are looking to expand more and have higher employment and wealth creation ability. Government has come up with certain limitations or restrictions also. So a company which has recently split it from a large MNC or a restructured firm. For instance, let's say tomorrow the Reliance Industries split up and Ambani brothers bring up a new company. So will that company end startup? No. Because they are getting splitted into a large MNC, they have capital, they have entrepreneurship, they have funds, everything possible. So that is not going to be a startup. Hence, the facilities which are provided by the government will not be available to those companies. Secondly, after completing 10 years of its operation or earning more than 100 crore rupees, will keep a startup out of the definitions facilities provided by the government. Now all these conditions are important because very soon we'll discuss about the government initiative. And in order to avail those government initiative, a person or a company or a startup should meet these conditions. With this, let us look into what is the current status of startup in India. Well, India is the third largest startup hub in the world and annually growing at 12 to 15%, which is very good growth rate as far as new business is concerned. India as of now have over 50,000. I am saying over 50,000. It may be around 1 lakh. And these startups are actually functioning. Most of them die out very soon. But yes, India is third largest ecosystem to generate new startups. Majority of these startups are in the field of technology, specifically the IT services including mobiles, laptops and others. In 2018, the annual growth was 15% to this sector And the women entrepreneurship or the women players who are starting a startup constitute about 14% in the last 2 years. These startups have created over 40,000 new jobs in a year, and overall jobs created were around 1.6 to 1.7 lakh, which is very high given the kind of limitations they have with their operations. These kind of data will help you to frame good introduction in your answer or can help you to frame good arguments in favor or in against of the startup ecosystem in India. Now, as UPSC does not only demands you to go through the basic content of a particular issue, they also want you to go through the basic challenges of the sectors because they want a good policy maker in the government. So let us look into some of the challenges faced by this sector. Now these are 11 major challenges which are faced by startup ecosystem in India. The first top issue is the financial resources available to the startups. Most of the startups in India are looking for high grade and quality funding resources. But despite this, the domestic availability of the resources are far less than the foreign availability of resources. However, every startup does not have access to the foreign sources, so they end up getting limited resources and limited growth. One of the important reasons for this difference is that the venture capital market or the people who take risk-led investment into new companies is very poorly developed in India. The venture capitalist growth and their share in the financial markets in India is very low. These are those people that take risk, provide funds to the newly growing companies. And because of these two reasons, once they do not get good financial resources or venture capitalists, they end up getting low productivity, low output, and low growth. Because of which, the revenue generation remains very limited. Several startups have failed just because of their poor revenue generation. They mostly focus on generating the funds rather than generating their business. And because of this focus, they end up getting low revenue and soon winding up their startups. The supporting infrastructure in the startup system or the ecosystem is very limited. Right from incubator centers, science and technological parks, business development centers, all these are very limited or regionally very diverse. There are certain states which have these centers to a very higher extent, such as Delhi NCR, Gujarat, Karnataka, Maharashtra, or even the Telangana. While on the other side, we have states like Bihar, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, in fact, states like Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan, which are very backward in providing the supporting infrastructure to these startups. Then comes the issue of skilled labor supply. Most of the startups in any country are looking for the right amount of skills from their labor. But as India is a country where 90% of the labor supply is either unskilled or they are skilled in not so good quality. IT startups who are looking towards the financial sector find it difficult to have good quality labor with right amount of skill supply for the growth of their businesses. Then we have startups being limited to the few sectors that we have already discussed. These startups are very much absent in primary areas such as agriculture, animal husbandry, or fisheries. Even the regulatory framework in the country is not up to mark. Starting and even exiting a business requires number of permission from the government and their agencies. This includes regulations pertaining to labor laws, intellectual property, or even the dispute resolution between the owners and the investors. Then come the regional issues. Well, some states in India are inherently developed and they provide ample policy support to all the kinds of startups which are blooming up in their particular state. On the other hand, the poorer states are incapable to provide the initiatives such as funding, availability of labor, or in fact the basic incubation center or business development center. And that is the reason why some of the startups are not getting that support or push in order to grow to a further extent. This is one of the reasons why startups which are developing up in the poorer states are not getting enough push to become a unicorn company. Then we have the issues related to the tech soaps. There are certain tech soaps which are provided by the center that we will discuss very shortly. On the other, there are tech soaps which are provided by the state government, or the tax initiative which were provided under the particular industrial policy of a state differs from region to region. Some states provide more benefit while the other provide less benefit. Startups which are generating in the states which are providing less tax soaps or tax initiatives are getting hurdles vis-a-vis those which are not getting in the rich states. Then we have the long-term support. As we have gone through the definition of the startups, there are certain areas of startups which require a period more than 10 years. Let's take an example of a company which is functioning in the wooden furniture. So an entrepreneur who wants to grow the wooden furniture requires the raw material of wood. And let's say that person is functioning through his own property resources and have his own commercially grown forest. Now, commercially grown forest will take time beyond 10 years. So that person would require more technical support as well as funding support from the government vis-a-vis those startups which are functioning in the IT or the commercial sector. And lastly, we have the issue of exit policy. Whenever a startup gets distracted, goes through the negative returns, or are not able to generate the growth which they perceive to generate, they require to end up their business, liquidate their asset, and give up the money back to their particular investors. In order to do that, they need the exit policy. In absence of exit policy, what happens that these firms end up getting high debts of interest, and ultimately losing out the reputation in the market. So these are the basic challenges which are faced by the startups in India, and because of these challenges, Government of India has initiated these particular schemes or initiatives. The first one is Startup India. Launched as an initiative, it provided 3 years of tax and compliance break to new startups to cut down the regulatory framework of the government and of course the red tapeism. Then government has brought the Mudra scheme, under which they have created a separate funding mechanism for the micro units to raise easy fund or money to start their business or even run their business to a larger extent. Mudra initiative has been very helpful to women entrepreneur and entrepreneur from scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, and in fact the minorities. Then comes the Setu initiative, which is also known as self-employment and talent utilization. Under this, central government has allocated 1000 crore rupees in order to create opportunities for the self-employment. Now the word is self-employment, not wage employment. And also to support new jobs, mainly in the technological driven domains. So those startups which wants to grow in the technological sphere can take the funding mechanism for the self-employment under Setu scheme. They have also started a fund of funds under which a corpus of 10,000 rupees crore have been created to provide extended support to those entities or financial institutions which are lending for the startup culture. For instance, there is a company with the name A, and A company wants to raise a fund for their business, and the funding which will be provided to A will be provided from a bank with the name B. So let's say this B bank is going to provide funds to company A, but under the fund of fund scheme, a new fund will be created which will provide funds to the bank B, which will ultimately lend the fund to company A. So this is how it is known as fund of funds. Government has also started the e-biz portal, which provide the one-stop solution for 14 regulatory related compliances at one place. It will also provide licenses as well as faster clearance in order to improve the ease of doing business in India for the startups. Then we have the Tech Soaps initiative. Government has itself provided the exemption from capital gain tax, angel tax as well as tax exemptions for 3 years for the investment which is above the fair market value. Through self-certification programs, government has provided the trust between the startups as well as the regulatory body and has simplified the process of starting a new business through the paperwork. On the royalty tax, the government of India has reduced the tax payment from 25% to the 10%. Royalty tax is the tax which the startup pay while they utilizes the property of the other taxpayer. So let's say they are starting and start a business in a particular factory, in a particular house or a particular shop. Then they are exempted from the royalty tax, the tax which is paid by the actual owner. And this exemption has been reduced from 25 to 10%. Then lastly, government is also providing the credit guarantee fund. Now, startup is a risky business and it requires some kind of guarantee to the investor. Now, most of the investors find it very risky to bring the direct investment to the new startups because the business might end up getting hurt and they might lose the entire money which they have invested. So, in order to prevent it from that high risk, government itself has provided the guarantee to the investors who will provide funds to these startups. Now, given the government initiative, a lot has been done, but a more could also be done through the following way forwards. The first one is that government needs to focus on those skills which are demanded by the startups. Ease of doing business in the startup ecosystem should also focus on easy entry as well as easy policy. As of now, government is focusing more on the entry part. But for instance, if a company has already failed or the entrepreneur has already failed in first business and they are stuck with the exit problems, they won't be able to wind up the first business which failed or start up with the second business because they're already stuck in their first business and it's winding up. So once they have the easy exit policy, they will easily be shifting their business, their funds from one to the other. Then we need to start up with the primary sectors also. Why we are leaving the agriculture, animal husbandry and fishing behind from this high potential growth sector? Entrepreneurs should be promoted by the government or by the other investors who can function through the agriculture, animal husbandry and other primary sector areas. For this, the focus area could be the food processing itself. And in that also we can focus more on the micro food processing unit. Then state could also be supported from the central side in order to make a common policy. A policy which suits all the entrepreneurship, all the startups simultaneously and in a similar fashion in order to bring the uniformity across the states and remove the discrepancies which are being faced by the startups. Government can also promote the infrastructure on the lines of SAYS. So we have information technology related SAYS in Delhi NCR. Why can't we have the startup related SAYS across the country where small units of startups could come up? We can have incubation center, we can have business development centers on those places and new businesses could be developed. We can have financial institutions, we can have investors available on the similar platform in the similar ground. And lastly, we can focus more on developing the startups in the rural areas. Why? Because of the clause that 66% or 2/3 of the India's population is residing in the rural areas. Apart from that, rural areas is also responsible to provide half of the employment in the country. And if we can provide startups in the primary sector, we can definitely leverage the growth of startups in these areas. With this discussion in place, now we have enough and ample evidences and content to prepare a topic for GS paper 3, Industrial Growth Startup Ecosystem. And I leave you with this question. So read this question carefully and try to answer under 250 word limit with the content that we have already discussed. Let us now move to the next article of the day. This article was published on page 5 of Delhi edition Hindu newspaper and talks about the recent initiative which was started by the government of Haryana and the government of Himachal Pradesh to revive the ancient river Saraswati and its flow through the construction of a separate dam. This dam will be constructed in the Adi Badri area of Haryana's Yamuna Nagar district, which is situated in the northeastern part of the state of Haryana and has a border with the Himachal Pradesh. This is that area where the Himalayas, the Shivalik hills, actually meet the Yamuna Ganga Doab. Now, from the perspective of UPSC, this article is important for your prelim examination for two. First being the current affairs and the second being the map work. Now, UPSC has asked questions multiple times on the rivers, their fronts, their river basins, and in fact their tributaries. So, for that matter, this is important. In the mains examination, this can have a strong point and argument for your general studies paper 1 history and geography because Saraswati river has a historical evidences also. And from your perspective and from the perspective of general studies paper 3, it is important for your economic development because of the multi-purpose dam and also the irrigation purposes. So in the mains examination, you can quote such kind of initiative in order to make your argument more stronger. Today in this discussion, we'll learn about the Saraswati River, its historical evidences, and we will also look into the initiative which is being taken up by these two states and also the evidences of Saraswati River and its actual flow. Now, as you must know that Saraswati River does not exist as of now. Saraswati River had a mention in Rigved, that is 1500 BC, around 3005 years ago. There was a mention of this river. This river was known as a great holy river in the northwestern part of India. This river had important Vedic religious importance, where river Saraswati was also considered as goddess Saraswati. Even in the later Vedic period, that is the period in which other three Veds were written, that is Samved, Yajurved and Atharvaved. When these three Vedas were written, along with these Vedas, other complementary literature was written which included the Brahmana. One of the Brahmana, which is known as Tandya Brahmana, along with the Jaiminiya Brahmana, mentioned, which was later supported by Mahabharata, that river Saraswati had dried up in the desert. Simply means that early Rig Vedic period says that there was a flowing Saraswati. Later Vedic period says that Saraswati had dried up, that too in the desert. It simply means that Saraswati's location was in the northwestern part of Indian subcontinent but not beyond the Indus River. So, which brings us to the conclusion that the Saraswati River was somewhere flowing through the state of Haryana and Rajasthan, or it might have ended in the state of Gujarat or maybe in the Sindh of Pakistan. Evidences which were collected from the Indian Space Research Organization has observed that in the past, that is ancient Indian history, the cities of Indus Valley civilizations such as Kalibangan, Banavali, Rakhigadi, Dholavira and Lothal were part of the Saraswati basin and not the Indus basin. Many of the historians as well as some of the scientists have argued that Ghaggar river is presently flowing in India. Although it is not a perennial river, it is mostly fed by the rivers or the canal water of the other rivers. Ghaggar Hakra river was part or was the offshoot of past Saraswati river is not true. Ghaggar Hakra river or the flow of this river is not the real evidences of past Saraswati river which was concluded very recently. However, the evidences clearly shows that Saraswati river flowed through the state of Rajasthan in the ancient Indian history.
Now, coming back to the article itself, as you can see in this physical map of India taken from the Google Earth, this is the place where the dam will be constructed. As you can see, this is the foothill of Shivalik mountain range, and on the foothills of this Shivalik mountain range, this particular dam will be constructed, which will help later to revive the Saraswati river. If you go through the zoom map of this area, we'll find that these are some of the small tributaries, or these are some of the small streams which are coming from the Shivalik hills. Now, Adi Badri Dam will be constructed on a small stream which is known as River Som. River Som and other rivers actually disappear somewhere here in the northern part of Yamuna Nagar district of Haryana. They do not form the part of tributaries to river Yamuna, which you can see. Well, this is the river Yamuna, as you can see the broad part of this river. So river Yamuna does not have any component or relation in reference to river Saraswati. So if this dam is created on river Som, this dam will revive this almost dead river again and can help in constructing a new river altogether. Now, what will be the macro benefit of this project? As you can see, this map is based on the research papers which are submitted to different universities. Now, this paper clearly shows that the evidences of Saraswati river is seen in the state of Rajasthan. As you can see, this blue color is the river Saraswati. But the point is, most of these river channels are situated in the state of Haryana. Now, Haryana is a state which has alluvial soil, and rivers frequently change their directions. And because of this, scientists could not find the exact route of past Saraswati river. However, in this map, we can easily see that the red lines which are shown could possibly be the actual pathway of Saraswati river. And from this map, it can easily be deduced that Saraswati might be the actual river which flowed from northern part of Rajasthan, or Ghaggar river was actually one of the tributary of Saraswati river. But the actual river flow of Saraswati river is yet to be discovered. Now, from this discussion, we can easily see that if this river comes to existence, what will happen? If this Saraswati river comes to life, one thing is sure: the northern part or the northwestern part of Rajasthan, which is known as semi-arid area or semi-arid desert area, will come under the irrigation potential. The cultivable wasteland will come under the net zone area. We have already seen the example of Indira Gandhi Canal running towards the desert part or the further western part of Rajasthan along the Jaisalmer Bikaner districts. So, coming up of another canal from middle of Rajasthan through the revival of Saraswati river can definitely bring millions of hectares of land under irrigation. That will benefit not only the state of Rajasthan, not only the state of Haryana, but the overall economy as such. With this discussion in place, let us now move to the next article for the day.
This article was published on page 5 of Delhi edition Hindu newspaper and talks about the new tiger census which is going to be started from Bandipur and Nagarhole Tiger Reserve. According to the government, this is going to be the 5th census in this regard. So, from the perspective of UPSC, both from the prelims as well as mains examination, it is important to understand the status of tiger population, because tiger is an endangered species in India, also the national animal of India. So from the prelims perspective, this is important for your current affair. So you should know about basics of tiger census in the country. You should also know about the basic location of Bandipur and Nagarhole in the country. From mains perspective, it is important under the conservation of important flora and fauna in your environment and ecology in GS paper 3. The context says that tiger census will commence in these two national parks, also the tiger reserves.
And this will become the All India Tiger Mega Herbivore Estimation. This is going to be the fifth such census, which is held at a gap of 4 years. Previous surveys were conducted in 2003, 10, 14, and 18. The relevance of this article from prelims perspective is so high that in 2017 UPSC itself had asked questions related to the tiger census conducted in India. The question was asked related to the M stripes, which is an application which was used in order to conduct this survey or measure the number of tigers in a particular area. Answer to this was option B, and this shows the relevance of conservation of tiger from the perspective of UPSC examination. The responsibility of this goes to the National Tiger Conservation Authority, which is a statutory body and constituted under the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Tiger comes under the Schedule 1st of this act and also enjoys the highest level of protection from poaching, hunting, and other dangers. This authority functions under the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Now, this authority was constituted in order to provide the statutory authority to Project Tiger. Now, Project Tiger was initiated in order to raise the population of tiger across the nation through conservation effort, that too in situ. In situ simply means over the same area. So let's say a tiger is found in, let's say, Nilgiri areas or Western Ghats. So that tiger will not be relocated. Instead, his entire area will be termed as a conservation area, maybe a national park or a tiger reserve. So that is what we call as in situ conservation. This authority provides accountability to the state and center in the management of tiger reserve. So whenever it comes to the management of tiger reserve, National Tiger Conservation Authority is the main agency. It also acts as an arm of the parliament to provide oversight over the tiger conservation effort. And it also addresses the livelihood interest of the people who are living in surrounding of the tiger reserve. So National Tiger Conservation Authority has responsibility for tiger reserves and not national park. But if both of them are there together, that is, if a tiger reserve is part of a national park, then it will share the responsibility with the other authorities as well. This authority has been running the Project Tiger, which was started in 1973 and is a 100% centrally sponsored scheme. It means that the state will not spend a single rupee in the conservation of tigers under Project Tiger. They provide help to the tiger range states for in situ conservation and also try to bring people's participation towards the tiger conservation. The main objective of Project Tiger remains to provide guarantee viable population. It simply means to raise the population of tigers for financial, scientific, aesthetic, social and ecological values. It will try to limit or in fact reduce all those threats which may endanger the population of tiger, such as hunting, poaching or even the population or deforestation. And ultimately it will function to reduce the burden of humans over the tiger reserve through different initiatives. Now coming to the census, which was the theme of this article, we will talk about the past census and see what that census has to offer. The previous census, which was published in 2018-19, was the fourth in this cycle. It used the double sampling method in which the mark of tiger were captured in order to count these tiger thoroughly. They also utilized the M stripes. As we can see, this was asked by the UPSC in 2017. So they utilized the M stripe application in order to monitor the tiger's intensive protection and ecological status. It is an IT based application which provided authentic information collection as well as processing. From this table, we can easily deduce that the tiger population has been increasing consistently in the past 15 years, which is a very good sign from the conservation effort. And because of this, India was able to achieve its target at St. Petersburg Declaration,
which targeted to double the tiger's population by 2022. However, India has already done between 2006 to 2018 through doubling its tiger population, that too 4 years before the target. According to the previous census, Madhya Pradesh had the highest population, followed by Karnataka and Uttarakhand. There was an increase in the population of tiger in Andhra Pradesh, but decline in Chhattisgarh and Odisha, which are also known for evergreen forest. Tigers were not at all recorded in Baksa, Dampa, and Palamu Tiger Reserve, which means despite being having the tag of tiger reserves, these tiger reserves does not even have a single tiger, and this shows their past poor record. According to the census, the tiger population was increasing at 6% per annum, and after the conduction of census, it was found that there is no tiger in the state of Mizoram and Nagaland.
As you can see from this map of tiger reserves in India, the tiger reserves which were mentioned in the article were Nagarhole and Bandipur. Both these tiger reserves are part of Western Ghats around the Nilgiri range. So, from the perspective of UPSC, it is important for you to understand and remember important tiger reserves in the news articles, as well as overall the names of these tiger reserves and their locations across India. From this map, you can easily identify that there are certain states, for instance, Gujarat or Haryana or Punjab, Himachal Pradesh, where there is no location of tiger reserves in the country. So, from this entire discussion, what we have learned is how this tiger census is conducted, what is the current status of tiger population in India, and how the institutional framework functions for the tiger conservation in the country. With this discussion in place, let us now move to the question of the day. So, read this question of the day and try to answer in the comment box. With this, now we come to the end of today's Daily News Simplified. Thank you.